SEAL Admiral asked her rank as a joke, until he noticed her sniper tattoo and froze. The question was meant as a joke, a harmless one. At least that's what the SEAL Admiral thought when he asked it. The ceremony had been running long. Formal speeches, polished uniforms, rows of officers standing at attention beneath fluttering flags. It was a joint recognition event, part military, part civilian, honoring service members and their families. The atmosphere was respectful, structured, predictable, until she stepped into the room. Her name was Lena Walker. To everyone else, she looked like a civilian guest, mid-30s, calm posture, simple black jacket, hands clasped behind her back as she stood near the rear wall. No medals, no uniform, no attempt to draw attention. But there was something about her stillness, not stiffness, not nervousness, control. The kind that didn't come from confidence alone, but from experience. The Admiral noticed her almost immediately. Decades in special operations had trained his eyes to spot details others missed. Threats, posture, awareness. He could read a room the way others read a book, and Lena didn't read like a civilian. She wasn't scanning nervously. She wasn't distracted. She wasn't impressed. She stood there like someone who had waited in far worse rooms, with far more on the line. The Admiral watched her from across the floor, curiosity growing. Who was she? A spouse? A contractor? A guest who wandered into the wrong event? When the formalities paused and small conversations broke out, he decided to satisfy that curiosity. He approached casually, coffee cup in hand, wearing the relaxed confidence of a man who outranked nearly everyone in the building. "Enjoying the ceremony?" he asked. Lena nodded politely. "Yes, sir." Her voice was calm, even, respectful but not intimidated. That alone was unusual. The Admiral smiled faintly. He glanced at her hands, then her shoulders, then back to her face. No visible rank, no insignia. And that's when he said it. "So," he asked lightly, almost teasing, "what rank are you?" A few nearby officers chuckled under their breath. It was a familiar joke, a harmless way to break the ice with civilians who looked a little too comfortable around uniforms. Lena paused, just for a moment. Then she answered, "I'm retired." The response was simple, neutral, but something about it made the Admiral's smile hesitate. "Ah," he said, amused. "What retired?" Lena shifted her weight slightly, and that's when her jacket sleeve pulled back. Just enough. The room didn't change, the noise didn't stop, but the Admiral froze, because on Lena Walker's forearm, inked with precision, faded only by time, not neglect, was a tattoo he recognized instantly. Not because it was flashy, but because it was rare. A sniper designation mark, combined with unit symbols that almost never appeared outside classified circles. Clean lines, exact placement, no exaggeration. It wasn't decorative, it was professional. The kind of tattoo you didn't get because you admired snipers, the kind you earned because you were one. The Admiral's mind raced. That symbol wasn't taught in books, it wasn't shown in museums, it wasn't even widely acknowledged. Only a handful of people in the entire force had carried it, and even fewer were still alive. His amusement vanished, his posture straightened, his coffee cup lowered slowly, because suddenly the joke didn't feel like a joke anymore. Lena noticed the change immediately. She had been trained to. She calmly adjusted her sleeve back into place, hiding the tattoo once more. Her expression didn't change. No pride, no defiance, just quiet awareness. The Admiral stared at her, not rudely, not openly, but with the sharp focus of a man replaying memories he hadn't touched in years. That tattoo meant long days hidden in terrain where movement meant death. It meant patience beyond comfort. It meant decisions made in seconds that echoed for lifetimes. And it meant rank didn't apply the way he had assumed. The Admiral cleared his throat. "May I ask," he said carefully, "where you served?" Lena met his eyes for the first time. Her gaze was steady, unblinking. "Places that don't exist anymore," she replied. Then she added, quietly, "and some that wish they didn't." The lights dimmed as the ceremony resumed. Lena turned slightly, preparing to step back into the shadows where she clearly preferred to stand. But the Admiral didn't move, because in that moment he understood something profound. The most dangerous people in the room don't announce themselves. They don't wear rank. They don't seek recognition. And they certainly don't answer jokes the way Lena Walker just had.
The Admiral didn't follow her. Not immediately. That alone said everything. Men at his level were used to controlling rooms, conversations, outcomes. They didn't let moments slip away unless they chose to. And yet, as Lena Walker stepped back toward the wall, blending once more into anonymity, he remained rooted where he stood. Thinking, remembering, calculating. Because the tattoo he'd seen wasn't just rare, it was deliberate. Every line carried meaning. Every symbol had purpose. There were no mistakes in it, and no room for pretenders. He'd known men, and a handful of women, who carried similar marks. Most of them never made it to retirement. And those who did, never talked about it. Across the room, Lena resumed her quiet watch. She stood with her hands loosely folded, eyes forward, posture relaxed but ready, the kind of readiness that never truly turns off. Years might pass, uniforms might disappear, but training like hers carved itself into muscle and instinct. She felt eyes on her, not just the Admiral's. Others had noticed the shift, the way a senior officer had gone silent mid-conversation, the way his expression had hardened into something resembling respect. Whispers began, subtle and restrained. "Who's that? Did you see his face? Why did he stop smiling?" Lena ignored them all. She had survived by doing exactly that. The Admiral finally moved. He didn't approach her again. Instead, he turned toward a group of senior officers, men and women who had worn stars and commanded fleets. He leaned in, voice low, words chosen carefully. "Anyone recognize that woman near the back?" They glanced where he gestured. One captain frowned. "No insignia. Civilian?" The Admiral shook his head slowly. "Not a chance." Another officer followed his gaze more closely. "Why?" "Because she doesn't stand like one," the Admiral replied, "and because of what I saw on her arm." That got their attention. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Those who understood, understood. One of the officers excused himself and walked casually toward Lena, as if heading for a drink. As he passed, his eyes flicked toward her sleeve, searching. But the tattoo was gone again, hidden, just as Lena intended. The officer continued on, unsettled. "She knows," he murmured later. "She knows when she's being watched." The Admiral exhaled slowly. That confirmed everything. The ceremony resumed in full. Speeches echoed across the hall, words about honor, service, sacrifice. Applause followed at the appropriate moments. Lena listened politely, but certain phrases landed differently for her. Courage under fire. Unseen heroes. The cost of silence. She had lived those words, not in ceremonies, but in dust-filled valleys, frozen rooftops, and hours of stillness where a single breath could give everything away. She shifted her weight slightly, memories pressing in uninvited. The Admiral watched her again, not as a curiosity now, but as a peer. He noticed the way her eyes tracked exits without obvious movement, the way she positioned herself with clear sightlines, the way she never fully turned her back to the room. These were habits forged under pressure, habits that never truly left. And suddenly, the joke he'd made earlier felt heavier than he'd expected. Not offensive, just ignorant. During a brief intermission, he made his decision. This time, when he approached, there was no casual tone, no humor, no teasing. He stopped at a respectful distance. "Ms. Walker," he said quietly. She turned. "Yes, sir?" No hesitation, no flinch. He lowered his voice. "I owe you an apology." Lena blinked once. "For what, sir?" "For assuming, and for asking a question I hadn't earned the right to ask." Her expression softened, just a fraction. Apology accepted. They stood there in silence, not awkward, measured, mutual. The Admiral hesitated, then spoke again. "You don't have to answer this, but I need to know. Are there others like you still out there?" Lena considered him. Then she answered carefully. "Some, but most of us prefer it this way." She gestured subtly to her plain clothes, the lack of attention. "We did our jobs so others wouldn't have to know we existed." The Admiral nodded slowly. He understood that too well. Before he could respond, an announcement called everyone back to their seats. The moment broke. Lena turned to leave. But before she did, she paused. "Admiral," she said. He looked at her. "You weren't wrong to ask the question. Just early." Then she stepped away, once again dissolving into the crowd. The Admiral returned to his seat, but he didn't hear the next speech. All he could think about was this. Some of the most lethal operators he'd ever known didn't wear uniforms anymore. They didn't stand on stages. They stood quietly at the back of rooms, watching. And one of them just reminded him that rank ends when experience begins.
The tattoo wasn't supposed to be seen. Lena Walker had learned that lesson long ago, back when visibility could mean death. In her world, the less you stood out, the longer you lived. That philosophy had carried her through missions, through loss, and eventually into a life where anonymity was the only reward she ever wanted. And yet, somehow, a single careless moment had opened a door she thought was sealed forever. As the ceremony continued, Lena remained still, but her mind had drifted far from the room, back to the reason the tattoo existed at all. Years earlier, in a place that never made the news, Lena had lain motionless on a rocky ridge for nearly 26 hours. No sleep, no food, just water rationed down to sips. Below her, an insurgent commander moved freely, unaware that his final hours were already measured. The wind was wrong. The light was fading. The margin for error was non-existent. She had waited, because snipers didn't rush. They endured. When the moment finally came, it lasted less than a second. One breath out, one squeeze, one decision that saved an entire convoy she would never meet. No applause followed. No medals were handed out. Only a quiet confirmation over the radio, and then silence. The tattoo came later, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of patience, of restraint, of the cost of being right when it mattered most. Back in the present, the Admiral sensed the shift in her. He could see it in her eyes, that distant focus that wasn't daydreaming, but remembering. He'd worn the same look after missions that ended clean on paper, but left scars no report ever captured. When the final speech concluded and the room rose in applause, he stood too, but not for the speaker, for her. Lena moved toward the exit as people clustered in conversation. She had stayed long enough. Any longer and questions would multiply, and she had no interest in answering them. But as she neared the doorway, a young officer stepped into her path, respectful, nervous. "Ma'am," he said, lowering his voice. "The Admiral asked if you'd be willing to speak with him privately." Lena studied him for a moment. He was squared away, earnest, knew enough to know when not to ask. She nodded once. 5 minutes. They met in a quiet hallway lined with photographs, generations of service frozen in frames, men and women in uniform, some smiling, some not. The Admiral didn't waste time. "I reviewed the symbols," he said, "from memory." Lena didn't respond. "There are only 3 confirmed operators who ever carried that mark. 2 are listed as KIA. She met his eyes. "And the third?" she asked. The Admiral swallowed. "Vanished." Lena exhaled softly. "That's one word for it." He studied her now without pretense. "You were never meant to exist on record." "No, we were meant to exist in outcomes." The Admiral nodded slowly. "I commanded operations influenced by your unit, targets neutralized before we even deployed." Lena's voice was calm. "That was the idea." A heavy silence followed. Then the Admiral did something few ever saw. He straightened, and he saluted her, not as an officer, but as a warrior. Lena didn't return the salute. She simply inclined her head, acknowledgement, not ceremony. "You don't owe me that." "I do," the Admiral replied, "because I asked you a question as a joke, and you answered it with restraint." He hesitated. "Why leave? You could have trained others, led, advanced." Lena looked at one of the photos on the wall, a younger face, smiling, eyes bright with purpose. "Because eventually," she said, "you either teach people how to survive, or you accept that survival means walking away." The Admiral absorbed that. "So what are you now?" he asked. Lena allowed herself a faint smile. "I'm someone who blends in and sleeps without a rifle nearby." He smiled back, briefly. "You earned that." As they parted, the Admiral felt something he hadn't felt in years: perspective. All the ranks, the authority, the structure, none of it compared to the quiet weight carried by someone who shaped the battlefield and then stepped away without asking for credit. And Lena? She walked out into the daylight, unnoticed once more, exactly how she preferred it. But the Admiral knew one thing now. History wasn't always written by those on the podium. Sometimes it stood silently at the back of the room.
Lena Walker didn't look back as she left the building. She never did. Doors closed, conversations faded, engines started in the parking lot. Life moved forward the way it always had, indifferent, unaware. And that was fine with her. She walked with the same steady pace she'd carried across foreign ground years ago. Not fast, not slow, purposeful. Every step measured, even now. Behind her, the Admiral remained standing in the hallway long after she was gone. He hadn't expected to feel this way. Not shaken, not surprised, humbled. That night, the ceremony replayed in his mind. Not the speeches, not the applause, but the moment his joke had met a truth far heavier than rank or protocol. He thought about the tattoo again, not as ink, but as a ledger. Every line represented patience under pressure. Every symbol marked restraint when chaos would have been easier. Every omission told a story that could never be told aloud. He had commanded men into battle. She had ended battles before they began. Days later, during a closed briefing, the Admiral found himself distracted. A junior officer was presenting threat assessments, terrain maps, projected casualties, operational windows. The Admiral interrupted. "Hold," he said. He stepped closer to the screen. "You're missing the invisible variable," he added. The room went silent. "Someone who's already there," he continued. "Someone unseen. Someone whose presence never appears in reports." The officers exchanged confused looks. The Admiral didn't explain further. He didn't need to. Elsewhere, Lena had returned to a life that felt almost unreal by comparison. Grocery stores, morning coffee, traffic lights. She stood in line like everyone else, unnoticed, unremarkable, and grateful for it. Sometimes, someone would brush past her shoulder and apologize. She'd nod politely.
They had no idea how close they were to history, and she liked it that way. One afternoon, Lena received a letter. No return address, no insignia, just a single line typed neatly on plain paper. Your restraint saved lives you'll never meet. That matters. She read it once, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not as validation, but as closure. Back at the command center, the Admiral stood before a wall of names. Those lost, those remembered, those who never made it home. And then, in his own private moment, when no cameras watched and no subordinates stood nearby, he did something he would never record. He raised his hand, and he saluted. Not a superior, not a subordinate, but a professional who had earned something rarer than medals. Silence. Because some warriors don't wear uniforms. Some never take the stage. Some leave behind nothing but outcomes. Lives saved, conflicts avoided, futures preserved. And some walk away so quietly that the world never realizes what it owes them. The Admiral lowered his hand. The moment passed, but the lesson didn't. He would never again ask that question as a joke, and he would never underestimate the quiet ones standing at the back of the room. Because sometimes the most powerful rank in the world is experience.